Mr. White from Mike's.
Hey folks, it is October the 20th, and we're going over the last half of chapter 15. And we are going to discuss the following terms: the Athenian forces, that's the invasion forces. Alcibiades, what happens to him, and what does he do? The siege at Syracuse, and what happened to Athens. So if you haven't read it yet, make sure that you read that following this. And that's pretty much it. We're going to start in just a second. I know. Well, hey, we got to make it to Rome. And then after Rome, we're going to talk about world geography. So there's a lot of different subjects in this class throughout the year. So, talk about the ancient Western world, and then we're going to talk about the rest of the world. Hey, that's the timer. I'll go ahead and show you the. All right. So one thing about Hellenistic religions, like you find in Greece and Rome, is they had a lot of cults, and cultus is it's a Latin word, and it was usually applied not necessarily to like what you might think of as a cult as a separate religion, but it was like they worshipped the Roman or the Greek gods, but they would really focus on one of them, right? So you have a cult where it was all about Zeus. It was all about Apollo. Well, they had one here called the Eleusinian Mysteries, and I forgot who their focus was. And Athens had a couple of these where it was only women were allowed to participate, and men were not supposed to go. It was seen as, once again, sacrilege, something that would anger the gods, something very unpious. Well, Alcibiades and his friends are going to be accused once again of interrupting something religious, one of these Eleusinian mysteries where they're holding like sacrifice or something like that. So this is going to be a big deal. The Athenians are going to call him back home, and he knows that this is going to be such a serious deal. If he's found guilty, he will be put to death. And he may have had good reason to believe this too, because his teacher, Socrates, if you know anything about him, he was put to death by the Athenian people simply because of his ideas. So he knew the dangers of going to the Athenian court.
I feel like the Athenians just sit there
If they were worshipping Athena, she was the god of women and hunting. If it's all women.
It could have been. It could have been Demeter. It could have been a lot of, it could have been maybe. I don't know. So, all right, let me go with thoughts back. I was trying to think. It didn't work. All right, so this is an ancient Greek piece of pottery with a picture of the Spartan general Gylippus, who we see is going to lead the Spartans, the Corinthians, and their allies against Athens and just totally crush them in Sicily. It's going to be very successful in that matter. And of course, a lot of it has to do with the surprise attack. The Athenians honestly thought that they had the advantage and that nobody was going to attack them with reinforcements or from the seas. So they were very surprised by this. And of course, they had information from Alcibiades, the traitor, who was one of the top 3 generals. So he knew all the battle plans, the movement patterns, where they were going, where they were stationed, all of that stuff. He had all the information. And he also had war advice. So this is the trip that the Athenians are going to take all the way to Syracuse. You see, they don't sail in the middle of the ocean.
They only sailed on the coast.
Yeah, and the reason for that is their boats were capable of doing it, but it was very dangerous as far as not just navigation, but also their boats weren't very well wind powered, and so often they had to stop along the coastline to let their men rest, especially the rowers. And sometimes they had to resupply and trade with the locals. So going on a sea voyage was kind of dangerous. You will find that during the Roman period, though, that they sail across the sea quite a bit. There's periods where the Mediterranean Sea go from very calm to very harder to sail as far as the waters get a little bit more storm weary, a little bit more torrentious and things like that. So I'm not sure which one is.
I know that's where you get the term starboard and port side.
Hey, really? Like port side, so it's like that's where the harbor is.
Yeah, it's one of the closest. Because they don't sail along.
Oh, that makes sense. See, I don't know anything about boats. I just learned something. Hey, here's a artist's interpretation of the Athenian retreat. So this is a full-scale fight as you run affair. The Athenians in their retreat, they're going to be separated from their supplies, and that's whenever you have ancient militaries, even all the way through, like say the Civil War, behind a moving army, you had something called baggage, or they call it a baggage train. And that's essentially like wagons or horses or mules carrying things like food and water and stuff like that for the troops. But they're going to be separated from this. They're going to go deeper inland, trying to run away from their enemies. And as they flee, they're going to be slaughtered. They're going to be weakened through hunger and thirst. A story, of course, talks about when they finally make it to a source of water, and men are just going to jump in, dying of thirst, drinking up as much as they can, even while they're being attacked. So that's some pretty terrible thirst to think of it there, where your priorities are between, am I going to pass like this or am I going to pass like that? So it's pretty rough. Many of them, all of them are going to be captured except for very, very few. And when they're captured, they're essentially going to be left into the elements with no protection. It's going to be winter. Many of them are going to freeze, many starve, many are going to die of disease. They already had diseases. They expected this battle to be very short. And as it dragged on, whenever you have a lot of men living together and they're not taking care of their hygiene, this is a common problem for armies, even in modern era, where the disease can spread throughout a camp. And it could be things that have to do with their waste, or simply because they're just so close to one another, illness spreads very quickly. So yeah, the Athenians had everything against them, but not Alcibiades. He escaped trial and went to Sparta. And the Spartans are going to welcome him with open arms. And as they welcome him, he's going to give them all the advice they want to know. And we're going to see when we come back later, the Spartans are essentially going to adopt this man. And he's going to win over their trust. He's going to live as a Spartan, train like a Spartan, until he makes them mad and he has to run away. And we'll get to that later.
He has a pattern.
He does it. Yes, he kind of, his life plays in a certain direction over and over. Singing?
It's kind of good at making people mad.
Make people mad. Well, if you do the things that he does, and we're going to see that he kind of does one of the worst things he could do, yeah, that would make people mad. That'd make people mad. So, moving on from there. All right, so Athens decides to have an invasion, and much like you might see out of the Iliad, they even bring in their religious elements. They're holding up, they have their wine mixture, and they're calling to their gods and things like that. Something straight out of the Iliad, and they're getting ready for this big invasion of a walled city. They're like, wow, look at me. I'm Achilles. Aren't I so brave? But speaking of their forces, though, what were they made up of? Did they just what?
Hoplites.
Well, hoplites, yeah. So did they just bring a couple?
About 7,000 people.
Okay, we'll just say over 7,000 hoplites. Remember that's their heavy infantry. When I say heavy, it means they're well armored. And anything else? Did they walk? No.
They took ships.
Big ships, yeah. Let's see, say many triremes. What about their leadership?
3 generals.
Led by 3 generals. Do we know their names?
Okay. Nicias.
It started with a D.
Yeah, D. Okay.
Are you sure, or was it an L in bold?
No, not really. But.
Well, I like the beginning.
Alcibiades.
Alcibiades? And what was the other one?
Decalab.
Lechalea.
Decelea.
You sure?
Oh, no, it's a D.
No, it's an L. No, that's too far. Now you're out of the chapter.
It's actually a good old friend, King Leonidas. He's
No.
not actually.
Lamachus.
Did you die? Unfortunately, yes. But I live.
And good old Alcibiades. Don't worry, we'll see later on. One day he will reach a period of regret and he'll be murdered by a friend.
We spoiled that. What's that?
It's very, oh, I'm sorry.
Lamb.
Wait, does he ask to be murdered or does his friend like purposely murder?
Is that
It's
a
on
U?
purpose. He wants,
Lamachus?
yes, I think so. Yeah, well,
Wait.
I think it's because he had a bounty on his head or something like that.
You were nice. Good to know you.
I might have a mix up.
Gonna kill you now.
Yeah, good friends collecting their bounties off you. All right, so, but if you make a lot of enemies, you might have a bounty. It makes sense. So Alcibiades, so he's down there in Sicily. He's one of the three generals. We see that. And how does he get in trouble again?
Oh, he.
Was he the one who suggested that they make as much friends as they can?
He did. Yeah, so said Athens needed allies. So he was like, hey, we don't need to rush this, we need friends. So that's good advice.
Wait, where
right?
do they need allies from? Where is it? Sicily?
Sicily, yeah. So they're attacking Syracuse, the main city there. But they're wanting to get their neighbors to help them attack Syracuse. And so, but then Athens sends a boat with a message. What does the boat say?
Come back and stand trial.
Yes. Call him for trial. And he's had a shady past. And he has enemies. And for it's not like
Sacrilege.
yeah, for sacrilege stuff. Yeah, so like, whoa, you messed up our religious stuff.
Makes sense too.
We're like, you're gonna get the sky people mad at us. That's the last thing they wanted. The sky.
But he escapes, doesn't he?
Yeah, so where's he escaped to?
In Sparta.
But he fled to Sparta.
That was my thing. That was my thing. You shouldn't have stolen that from me.
It's okay. We're a forgiving sort. So went to Sparta. And so when he fled to Sparta, he's gonna
Betray.
betray him. Yeah, he's a traitor. So
Unmerciful.
as a traitor, how do you spell traitor? Is it T-R-A-I?
Traitor.
There, okay, good. I knew there was I in there. As a traitor, he told Sparta everything.
Yeah. He's like 6'9" before. So he's old.
Yeah, this is like one of your worst nightmares. Not to have a traitor who's like, hey, I overheard some of the plans, or hey, I have a secret letter from one of the leaders. He was one of the leaders. So he was like the guy in charge of everything, and he's like, forget that.
I know exactly what they're gonna do.
Yeah, I came up with the plan, guys. Here it is. Let me share it with you. And
Sharing is caring.
he knows what the other guys want to do. He knows where everybody is. He knows their weaknesses. He's like, hey, Athens gets a lot of money from these mines. Why don't you stop them from getting money from those mines, all the silver mines? And
Wink,
Sparta's
wink.
like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And so Yeah, he's totally going to turn it around. So Sparta not only is going to win at Syracuse, Sparta's going to be able to win the whole war because of Alcibiades' advice. And so,
I love how they weren't even part of the war until like the last second. They're like, but actually,
yes. And this is really going to mess up Athens. Now, we're not saying that Athens was making right choices, but here we have, one of their top guys switching sides, and that's not going to be helpful for Athens. Now, the siege of Syracuse. At first, how was the siege going?
well,
Yeah, at first, the Athenians were winning, and they were quite happy.
until they got trapped and they all started down.
Yeah.
It was going well until it wasn't.
Did Syracuse have walls?
It did. It was known for having very, very good walls. But Athens had time on its side. They thought they did. And remember, they were building a second wall to use siege weapons.
A counter wall.
Yeah.
We have a wall, we have a bigger wall. And we're gonna shoot you from it.
And that's one form of siege warfare. Is they'll do this in medieval times too, on occasion and things like that. And they will get ballista and some catapults and things like that. And just eventually take it down. Eventually they'll try to make a bridge, because knocking down walls were hard, but they could at least knock off enough people on top of their defenses, and then make sure they can make a bridge onto the top of the wall and take over that way. First thing is you're winning.
Why
But-
not just take a ballista?
They didn't have them.
Well, the thing is, they had them, but they weren't powerful enough to knock apart walls very well.
That was the door.
But Sparta,
And their allies trapped them, like you said. Now they trapped their ships, their boats, their triremes.
It would be funny to start to build a wall against them.
It caused Athens to flee. So yeah, they're in full panic. They're fleeing, and like y'all pointed out earlier, the Athenians are leaving their injured and their dead comrades behind on the battlefield. That was a mark of shame. Even ancient Greeks, much like modern soldiers today, they train out to leave even the fallen or the deceased comrades laying in the battlefield. That's a sign of dishonor. They can't get a proper burial. And so it's completely crushing, humiliating defeat. They're fleeing in a chaotic manner. They can't even flee in a way where at least they're defensible, where they have a rear guard. They're just every man for himself. Let's try to run in a line. They're exhausted.
let's try to run in a line.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
And some of them managed to flee and find friends who will shelter them and hide them. But that's few and far between, because a lot of these cities didn't want to be the ones who took in a dangerous enemy when they had even more dangerous people who were willing to, like if you're hiding somebody, you see this in World War II. Like, let's say an American bomber pilot is shot down in World War II, and he parachutes down to safety, but it's Nazi territory. And
Well, frick.
where are you going to hide? The village people might not want to hide you because they're scared of the Nazis, right? So it was something similar to this. These Athenians run away, but what farmer would want to take them in? They might get in trouble with Syracuse. So they're on a track on an island, very far from home. So what happens to all those Athenian troops?
They become slaves, and they die, and they get sold.
Yeah,
Wait, no, it's prisoners, then they die and become slaves.
yeah. So the Athenians were captured. Many died, that's true, of hunger and thirst, cold, disease.
The 2 remaining generals were executed.
Ah, yes. The generals, and that was Nicias Demosthenes, who comes in later. We kind of skipped over him. Executed.
Oh, and the Athenians were also remembered by Darius.
Well, he's kind of not around to remember too much right now. And the rest sold into slavery. And that's exactly what Athenians did to all those others, remember? So it was almost in a cruel way justice. They were going around slaughtering men and then selling their families, and now they've had it done to them. And we're going to find when we come back tomorrow, yes, Alcibiades is going to be doing quite well in Sparta for a while, but the Athenians are going to be in full panic mode. They're like, wow, we made some huge mistakes, and we're really scared we're going to pay for them now. So,
Totally unfair.
well, it doesn't feel fair. Even if you do something wrong, getting a punishment, even if you deserve it, doesn't always feel like that. It's not supposed to. So, when we come back next time, we'll talk about chapter 16. And we'll see what happens after the defeat of Athens. Bless you. We'll see as the city is going to surrender back at home and all that good stuff. So, talk to you later, kids. Have a good one. That was short. It was only 21 minutes.
Video.